So guys, we've been talking about knives and boy have we been busy, but I wanted to take a moment this afternoon to actually talk to you guys about if you're getting into knife making, some of the ways you're going to need to get into it because tooling is everything. Now here's the thing. If you want to make knives and you see knives like this that have a really nice, clean, straight grind line, you say, man, I want to make knives like that. The thing is, you've got to understand, you got to figure out which tool made this to get results like this. There's been so many folks, and myself included when I first got started, is that you see these beautiful straight grind lines. You're like, yeah, I want to do that. And then you pick up a book, maybe like Tim McCrate or some of the early knife books, right? And it says, hey, well, you can use a file to do this, and very slow and very methodical. And I'm going to tell you something. None of my knives looked that good. In fact, they all sucked. And I had an incredibly difficult time even making something that vaguely resembled the knives that I saw in the magazines. And, I just didn't know what I was doing wrong. And it really does come down to equipment. Now, it is true that if you have someone with 30 years worth of experience, he can make a beautiful knife or a beautiful sword with a file and just sandpaper. It can be done. But as I am famous to say, it is not what can you do, it's what should you do. So as you get started in knife making, understand that your tooling is absolutely going to limit the quality and the precision of your blade. So let's kind of start. So first of all, you can in fact make a knife with just a file. In fact, you can make a knife out of a file. This will remove metal, and there were a couple of books that I had when I first got started, not the greatest of books. It said, yeah, sure, just bust out there. You can use that file and file it down into a nice knife blade. That sucked. Don't use a file. So for most of you starting from there, the vast majority of you guys are going to be grinding with either a bench grinder or the old standby. Now my buddy Ryu Lim has made a career out of grinding things with an angle grinder. And for most of you guys, not only is this the most accessible, it's also probably one of the most cheapest because a good high quality DeWalt grinder like this may be 80 bucks. And it comes with a variety, you can get a variety of different attachments here as far as rocks and flat wheels and things like that. And you can make a fairly damn nice using an angle grinder. But of course it has some drawbacks to it. But for most of you guys, this is where you're going to start. Now, the other thing, you might be lucky enough to have a bench grinder with a rock on it. It is not as effective as the angle grinder. It's usually not nearly as aggressive, though it does have a work rest, which can be handy, but still not an ideal thing. If you guys have started out and you made maybe your first knife, you had a bench grinder, and you just went to town, and you may have got something that had an edge on it, but it damn sure wasn't pretty. But if you are fortunate enough, and if you have enough money in the bank, the real thing that you should be aiming at is a belt sander. Now, like so many of you guys, I kind of took a half step. I didn't go to the 2-inch by 72-inch belt sander, which is pretty much the absolute standard for knife making. I went down to Sears and I bought myself a 1-inch by 30-inch sander. And I made some fairly decent knives. Still, it wasn't a 2x72. So whenever you really want to get this type of result, you're going to have a very nice machine. Now let's take a look at some of the ones I have over here. Cameraman Bob is slowly pivoting. Excellent, Cameraman Bob. So this is my collection of 2x72-inch grinders. This was my first one. This was a Burke King that I bought from Ed Jackson. And this has a rubber contact wheel, and this is an industrial machine. This is really not a knife maker's machine. A lot of these types of machines were just kind of carryovers from other industries that knife makers adopted. It wasn't until later until you get into things like the KMG and Beaumont Metalworks that you had machines like this actually made to make knives on. And of course, now I gotta tell you, my favorite here is one of the early models, Ameribraids. This came from the set of Master at Arms. I may have absconded with this from the set because I don't know what they're doing with them, but boy, it's a nice piece. But this guy is really what you want to end up with for doing knife making for a couple reasons. Because it's got some versatility to it. One, it's got a good work rest. When you're carving up a knife, especially when you're working knife scales, you want to keep everything square. And a work rest that is 90 degrees to this platen here is exactly what you want. And then you guys have seen our faceted knives. We use this work rest in conjunction with a tri-square because this very quickly can be adjusted to 45 degrees. And now I can cut facets onto my knife handle. In addition, now this is one thing I do like about the Ameriblade and the ones that have a separate work rest piece, it can come right off. So also you can change the head on this. If you look right up here, we have a large contact wheel for large hollow grinding. We have a small diameter wheel. So these machines allow you a lot of options in how to finish your knife. Now, the reason I want to jump ahead and show you this is because let me show you your options for using an angle grinder. First of all, you really are going to need a table of some sort like this. A metal table preferably, because in order to properly grind a blade, look, if you grab your knife blade and you start trying to do this with your angle grinder, you're stupid. You're not going to be around very long. If you're going to properly grind a knife blade with an angle grinder, you've got to lock this down. And now here's the problem. Maybe you have a machinist vise. Well, guess what? It only holds your knife this way. Now, there's a couple tricks you can do to get around that, but still, the only way that a machinist vise, a modern vise, or even a post vise holds something well, it's up and down, and that's not the way you want to grind it. But if you have a table like this, and you have some clamps like this, you can come in here. Now, if I was a professional, I'd have this already set. And lock this down, and now you have a steady platform to be able to grind a knife blade with. And again, you can start with a rock, you can go to flat wheels, and you can get a very nice, even, consistent finish. But not only do you have to have the $80 angle grinder, you really need a fairly stable, fairly heavy table. Don't know how much that costs. So understand that it's not just 80 bucks. It's going to be a little bit more because you're going to have all the other tools to try to make do. So I just want to give you guys kind of a brief overview of these initial tools and what you're aiming for. In our next video, since most of you guys are going to be starting with something like this, I'm going to take one of our knife blanks and then I'm going to show you how, if I had to make a knife just using the table and the angle grinder, how I would go about and the results and the finish that you can expect. See you next time, guys.